Hi, this is Little Dwarf playing games while rambling incoherently into a microphone. Why? Well, just because I can, and I continue with Mass Effect 1 Legendary Edition. Now, this episode will be another portion of me reading the Codex, and nothing but that, so if you're not interested in that, you can just skip it, and the gameplay will resume next time, because I figured, I've gathered quite a lot of additional Codex entries. I think there will be 3 Codex reading episodes in total. I will do one now and one right before the end of the game. So let's get to the Codex. I do actually have an additional entry in the non-council races.
In the early 2160s, the Alliance began aggressive colonization of worlds in the Skyllian Verge, much to the dismay of the Batarians, who had been developing the region for several decades. In 2171, the Batarians petitioned the Council to declare the Verge a zone of Batarian interest. The Council refused, however, declaring unsettled worlds in the region open to human colonization. In protest, the Batarians closed their Citadel embassy and severed official diplomatic relations with the Council, effectively becoming a rogue state. They instigated a proxy war in the Verge by funneling money and weapons to criminal organizations, urging them to strike at human colonies. Hostilities peaked with the Skyllian Blitz of 2176, an attack on the human capital of Elysium by Batarian-funded pirates and slavers. In 2178, the Alliance retaliated with a crushing assault on the moon of Torfin, long used as a staging base by Batarian-backed criminals. In the aftermath, the Batarians retreated into their own systems and are now rarely seen in Citadel space.
Yeah, so pretty much the Batarians are butthurt about the fact that humanity beat them to colonizing some worlds, but it's entirely, I think they are entirely in the wrong, because it's not as if humanity has taken worlds that have already been colonized by the Batarians. Those were essentially empty worlds, right? It was uncharted land. So the Batarians are just butthurt because they lost the race to get to those places, and it's entirely childish and stupid to just draw a line in space, in literal freaking space, and say, oh, you can't get onto those planets because it's a Batarian zone of interest. No, those are empty. Literally, there's no one living there. To be honest, I feel like there should even be some other word to describe that, because the word, establishing a colonialism in our human reality, in reality, has a lot of dirty undertones having to do with exploiting natives and taking resources from the people who are already there, because most often than not, when developed countries were establishing colonies, they were doing that in places that were already inhabited. But it's not so with colonizing space, because most of those planets, most of them have no life at all, actually, apart from they have some simple animals and whatnot, but they have no sentient life for sure. They are not taking planets from other sentient species. They are just taking planets that are empty and settling them. So yeah, the Batarians kind of suck.
After the Geth secure a location, Thresher maws are subterranean carnivores that spend their entire lives eating or searching for something to eat. Threshers reproduce via spores that can lie dormant for millennia, yet are robust enough to survive prolonged periods in deep space and atmospheric re-entry. As a result, Thresher spores appear on many worlds, spread by previous generations of space travelers. The body of a Thresher never entirely leaves the ground. Only the head and tentacles erupt from the Earth to attack. In addition to physical attacks, Threshers have the ability to project toxic chemicals and emit bursts of infrasound as a shockwave weapon. The Alliance first encountered Threshers on the colony of Akuz in 2177. After contact was lost with the Pioneer team, Marine units were deployed to investigate. The shore parties were set upon by hungry Threshers, and nearly the entire assault force was killed. Alliance forces recommend engaging Threshers with vehicle-mounted heavy weapons.
So the fact that Thresher moth spores can survive, deep space and atmospheric re-entry is supposed to be an explanation for how you can, meet treasure moths on different uncharted planets in totally different environments as well.
The Citadel space is an unofficial term referring to any region of space controlled by a species that acknowledges the authority of the Citadel Council. At first glance, it appears this territory encompasses most of the galaxy. In reality, however, less than 1% of the stars have been explored. Even Mass Effect FTL drive is slow relative to the volume of the galaxy. Empty space and systems without suitable drive discharge sites are barriers to exploration. Only the mass relays allow ships to jump hundreds of light years in an instant, the key to expanding across an otherwise impassable galaxy. Whenever a new relay is activated, the destination system is rapidly developed. From that hub, FTL drive is used to expand to nearby star clusters. The result is a number of densely developed clusters, thinly spread across the vast expanse of space, connected by the mass relay network. The home world and capital of humanity is entering a new golden age. The resource wealth of a dozen settled colonies and 100 industrial outposts flows back to Earth, fueling great works of industry, commerce, and art. The great cities are greening as arcology skyscrapers and telecommuting allow more efficient use of land. Earth is still divided among nation-states, though all are affiliated beneath the overarching banner of the Systems Alliance. While every human enjoys a longer and better life than ever, the gap between rich and poor widens daily. Advanced nations have eliminated most genetic disease and pollution. Less fortunate regions have not progressed beyond 20th century technology and are often smog-choked, overpopulated slums. Sea levels have risen 2 meters in the last 200 years, and violent weather is common due to environmental damage inflicted during the late 21st century. The past few decades, however, have seen significant improvement due to recent technological advances.
Okay, so that clears up a misconception I had. I guess I remembered it wrong. The Alliance is not technically a world government. It's more of an international federation. It's something like, the EU, or if it was expanded to pretty much the entire world. Like, there are still member countries, but they are all affiliated under a single banner, and they, they present that banner of the Alliance as a joint entity towards other alien species. Okay.
Pharos is a habitable world in the Attican Beta Cluster. 2/3 of the habitable surface is covered with the ruins of a crumbling Prothean megatropolis. In the millennia since the Prothean extinction, the ruins have been repeatedly picked over by looters many times. Pharos was considered a poor prospect for colonization, as little open ground remains for agriculture. The only sizable freshwater sources are the poles, which are tapped by the decaying Prothean aqueduct systems. The dead cities, while in good condition considering their antiquity, are of uncertain stability. Ground level is congested by a dozen meters of fallen debris, and the air is fouled by dust. In 2178, the Human Exogeny Corporation announced its intention to place a permanent colony on Pharos to thoroughly explore the ruins. The pioneer settlement was placed on the upper levels of several intact skyscrapers, using the surviving Prothean aqueducts and rooftop hydroponic gardens to support the population. Vermeer is a lush world located on the frontier of the Attican Traverse. Its vast seas and orbital position on the inner life zone have created a wide equatorial band of humid, tropical terrain. Only the political instability of the region has impeded efforts at colonization. Many times the Citadel has opened negotiations to settle Vermeer with various criminal gangs and petty dictatorships in the nearby terminus systems. All fell apart due to internal power shifts within the opposing parties. The Citadel has written off the colonization of Vermeer as impossible without significant political change. The terminus powers themselves are unlikely to ever settle Vermeer. Most lack the resources to support settlement of a virgin world, finding it more expedient to steal from their neighbors than build for themselves. There are between 200 and 400 billion stars in the galaxy, and less than 1% of them have ever been visited or had their systems properly surveyed. Humanity's early expansion into the Attican Traverse was haphazard, a desperate race to claim habitable planets where populations can be economically settled. Ignored in the wake of this land grab were thousands of less hospitable worlds, each potentially rich with industrial resources. The wealth of entire solar systems lies untapped, waiting for corporate survey teams or independent pioneers to discover and exploit them. However, this is not an easy task. In addition to the environmental hazards, the fact that uncharted worlds are largely ignored makes them popular bases for criminals, revolutionaries, cults, and others who wish to remain unnoticed by galactic society. Faster-than-light drives use element zero cores to reduce the mass of the ship, allowing higher rates of acceleration. This effectively raises the speed of light within the mass effect field, allowing high-speed travel with negligible relativistic time dilation effects. Starships still require conventional thrusters, chemical rockets, commercial fusion torch, economy ion engine, or military anti-proton drive, in addition to the FTL drive core. With only a core, a ship has no motive power. The amount of ESO and power required for a drive increases exponentially to the mass being moved and the degree it is being lightened. Very massive ships or very high speeds are prohibitively expensive. If the field collapses while the ship is moving at faster than light speed, the effects are catastrophic. The ship is snapped back to sublight velocity, the enormous excess energy shed in the form of lethal Cherenkov radiation. Larger warships are generally classified in one of four weights. Frigates are small, fast ships used for scouting and screening of larger vessels. Frigates often operate in wolf-pack flotillas. Cruisers are middleweight combatants, faster than dreadnoughts and more heavily armed than frigates. Cruisers are the standard patrol unit and often lead frigate flotillas. Dreadnoughts are kilometer-long capital ships mounting heavy, long-range firepower. They are only deployed for the most vital missions. Carriers are dreadnought-sized vessels that also carry large numbers of fighters. Smaller vessels are almost exclusively used in a support role to the warships during combat. Fighters are one-man craft used to perform close-range attacks on enemy ships. Interceptors are one-man craft optimized for destroying opposing fighters. The Normandy is a prototype starship developed by the Human Systems Alliance with the assistance of the Citadel Council. It is optimized for scouting and reconnaissance missions in unstable regions using state-of-the-art stealth technology. For most ships, the heat generated through standard operations is easily detectable against the absolute zero background of space. The Normandy, however, is able to temporarily sink this heat within the hull. Combined with refrigeration of the exterior hull, the ship can travel undetected for hours or drift passively for days of covert observation. This is not without risk. The stored heat must eventually be radiated, or it will build to levels capable of cooking the crew alive. Another component of the stealth system is the Normandy's revolutionary Tantalus drive, a Mass Effect core twice the standard size. The Tantalus drive generates mass concentrations that the Normandy falls into, allowing it to move without the use of heat-emitting thrusters. Sovereign is the flagship of the rogue Spectre's Sarin. An enormous dreadnought larger than any other ship in any known fleet, it is crewed with both Geth and Krogan. At 2 kilometers long, its spinal-mounted main gun is likely capable of penetrating another dreadnought's kinetic barriers with a single shot. How Sarin acquired this incredible warship is unknown. The prevailing opinion is that Sovereign is a Geth construct, while others believe it is a Prothean relic. Its design, however, hints at a more alien and mysterious origin. The attack on Eden Prime demonstrated Sovereign's ability to generate mass effect fields powerful enough to land on a planetary surface. This implies it has a massive Element Zero core and the ability to generate staggering amounts of power. Ship mobility dominates space combat. The primary objective is to align the mass accelerator along the bow with the opposing vessel's broadside. Battles typically play out as artillery duels, fought at ranges measured in thousands of kilometers, though assaults through defended mass relays often occur at knife fight ranges, as close as a few dozen kilometers. Most ship-to-ship engagements are skirmishes between patrol vessels of cruiser weight and below, with dreadnoughts and carriers only deployed in full-scale fleet actions. Battles in open space are short and often inconclusive, as the weaker opponent typically disengages. Once a ship enters FTL flight, the combat is effectively over. There are no sensors capable of tracking them or weapons capable of damaging them. The only way to guarantee an enemy will stand and fight is to attack a location they have a vested interest in, such as a settled world or a strategically important mass relay. The Mako infantry fighting vehicle was designed for the System Alliance's frigates. Though the interior is cramped, an M35 is small enough to be carried in the cargo bay and easily deployed on virtually any world. With its turreted 155mm mass accelerator and coaxially mounted machine gun, the Mako can provide a fire team with weapon support as well as mobility. Since Alliance Marines may be required to fight on any world, the Mako is environmentally sealed and equipped with microthrusters for use on low-gravity planetoids. The Mako is powered by a sealed hydrogen-oxygen fuel cell and includes a small Element Zero core. While not large enough to nullify the vehicle's mass, the core can reduce it enough to be safely airdropped. When used in conjunction with thrusters, it also allows the Mako to extricate itself from difficult terrain. Biotics is the ability. When subjected to an electrical current, the rare material dubbed Element Zero, or EZO, emits a dark energy field that raises or lowers the mass of all objects within it. This mass effect is used in countless ways, from generating artificial gravity to manufacturing high-strength construction materials. It is most prominently used to enable faster-than-light space travel. EZO is generated when solid matter, such as a planet, is affected by the energy of a star going supernova. The material is common in the asteroid debris that orbits neutron stars and pulsars. These are dangerous places to mine, requiring extensive use of robotics, telepresence, and shielding to survive the incredible radiation from the dead star. Only a few major corporations can afford the setup costs required to work these primary sources. Humanity discovered refined Element Zero at the Prothean Research Station on Mars, allowing them to create mass effect fields and develop FTL travel. Element Zero can increase or decrease the mass of a volume of space-time when subjected to an electrical current. With a positive current, mass is increased. With a negative current, mass is decreased. The stronger the current, the greater the magnitude of the dark energy mass effect. In space, low-mass fields allow FTL travel and inexpensive surface-to-orbit transit. High-mass fields create artificial gravity and push space debris away from vessels. In manufacturing, low-mass fields permit the creation of evenly blended alloys, while high-mass compaction creates dense, sturdy construction materials. The military makes extensive use of mobility-enhancing technologies. with Mass Effect utilizing fighting vehicles standard frontline issue in most military forces. Mass Effect fields are also essential in the creation of kinetic barriers or shields to protect against enemy fire. Omni-tools are handheld devices that combine a computer microframe, sensor analysis pack, and manufacturing fabricator. Versatile and reliable, an Omni-tool can be used to analyze and adjust the functionality of most standard equipment, including weapons and armor, from a distance. The fabrication module can rapidly assemble small three-dimensional objects from common reusable industrial plastics, ceramics, and light alloys. This allows for field repairs and modifications to most standard items, as well as the reuse of salvaged equipment. Omni-tools are standard issue for soldiers and first-in colonists.
Okay, so that's the primary entries, and now there's quite a lot of those secondary entries as well that I need to read myself. So, technology translation. Human cultures remain linguistically divided. Some converse in Spanish, others in Mandarin, Arabic, Swahili, etc. Every alien race has their own equally broad panoply of languages and dialects. Most individuals know only their mother tongue and rely on machine translation. Modern portable computers allow everyone with a few hundred credits of equipment to enjoy seamless real-time translation of alien languages, courtesy of handheld PDAs, computers in clothing or jewelry, or subdermal implants. Without fast and accurate translation, galactic trade and culture could not exist. Governments provide subsidized software, updated through the public extranet on the fly, often as users approach spaceport custom facilities. Even the Batarians, who isolated themselves from galactic society nearly 2 decades ago, take pains to provide the up-to-date glossaries and linguistic rules, though most suspect this is only so that they can continue exporting propaganda. It is still considered broad-minded and practical to be able to speak without machine aid. Children often take courses in alien language, and most races can speak the simplified artificial trade tongue with little difficulty. Some species must rely on machine translation to interact with the rest of the galaxy. Hunter, for example, cannot reproduce the spoken language of any humanoid species, and the other races cannot reproduce Hunter bioluminescence without mechanical aid. Newly discovered or obscure races don't have the machine translation available until linguists have time to study them. Yeah, so that basically explains why seemingly all of the alien races speak English. But there are cases where the universal translator doesn't know a certain phrase or a certain word. It does crop up from time to time. Okay, so Asari biology. Asari have a robust cellular regenerative system. While they do not heal faster than other species, they are known to reach 1,000 years of age. Although Asari have one gender, they are not asexual. An Asari provides 2 copies of her own genes to her offspring. The second set is altered in a unique process called melding. During melding, an Asari consciously attunes her nervous system to her partners, sending and receiving electrical impulses directly through the skin. The partner can be another Asari or an alien of either gender. Effectively, the Asari and her partner briefly become one unified nervous system. This unique means of reproduction is the reason Asari are talented biotics. Their evolved ability to consciously control nerve impulses is very similar to biotic training. Asari believe that their offspring acquire the best qualities of their father from the melded genes, but the evidence is anecdotal. Asari pass through 3 climacteric life stages, marked by biochemical and physiological changes. The maiden stage begins at birth and is marked by the drive to explore and experience. Most young Asari are curious and restless. The matron stage begins at around the age of 350, though it can be triggered earlier if the individual melds frequently. This period is marked by a desire to settle in one area and raise children. The matriarch stage begins at around 700 or earlier if the individual melds rarely. Matriarchs become active in their community as sages and counselors, dispensing wisdom from centuries of experience. While each stage of life is marked by a strong biological tendency, individuals do not make unexpected life choices. Individuals do make unexpected life choices. For example, there are maidens who stay close to home rather than explore, and matrons who would rather work than build a family, and matriarchs who have no interest in community affairs. Asari culture, because of their long lifespan, Asari tend to have a long view, not common in other races. When they encounter a new species or situation, the Asari are more comfortable with an extended period of passive observation and study rather than immediate action. They are unfazed by some of their. They are unfazed that some of their investments or decisions may not pay off for decades or centuries. Matriarchs can seem to make incomprehensible decisions, but their insight is evident when their carefully laid plans come to fruition. In interstellar relations, the long view manifests in an unspoken policy of centrism. The Asari instinctively seek to maintain the stable balances of economic, political, and military power. Traditionally, Asari spread their influence throughout cultural domination and intellectual superiority. They invite new species of the advanced development to join the galactic community, knowing that their ideals and belief will inevitably influence the existing culture. Asari religion. The pantheistic mainstream Asari religion is Siari, which translates roughly as all is one. The faithful agree on certain core truths. The universe is a consciousness, and every life within it is an aspect of the greater whole, and death is merging one's spiritual energy back into the greater universal consciousness. Siarists don't specifically believe in reincarnation, but they do believe that spiritual energy returned to the universe consciousness upon death will eventually be used to fill in new mortal vessels. Siari became popular after the Asari left their homeworld and discovered their ability to meld with nearly any form of life. This ability is seen as proof that all life is fundamentally similar. Siari priestesses see their role as promoting unity between the disparate shards of the universe's awareness. Before the rise of Siari, Asari religions were as diverse as their political opinions. The strongest survivor of those days is the monotheistic religion, worshipping the goddess Atame. Like the Asari, the goddess cycles through the triple aspects of maiden, matron, and matriarch. Okay. Salarian biology. Salarians are noted for their high-speed metabolism, which allows them to function on just 1 hour of sleep a day. Man, I would love that. Love to be able to do that. Their minds and bodies work faster than most sapient races, making them seem restless or hyperactive. The drawback of this active metabolism is the short lifespan of around 40 human years. The Salarians are amphibian haplodiploid egg layers. Unfertilized eggs produce males and fertilized eggs produce females. Once a year, a Salarian female will lay a clutch of a dozen eggs. Social rules prevent all but a fraction from being fertilized. As a result, 90% of the species is male. Salarians have a photographic memory and rarely forget a fact. They also possess a form of psychological imprinting, tending to defer to those they knew in their youth. Salarian hatching is a solemn ritual in which the clan Dalatras, matriarch, isolates herself with the eggs. The young Salarians psychologically imprint on her and tend to defer to her wishes. During the hatching of daughters, the Dalatrases of the mother's and father's clans are present at the imprinting. This ensures that the offspring have equal loyalty to both, ensuring the desired dynastic and political unity. Salarian League of One. Now this is, I've been finding medallions of the League of One, so this is going to tell me, who they were. Before they joined the Citadel Council, the Salarians' most potent military tool was a small reconnaissance team known as the League of One. Their primary training was in espionage and assassination. Never more than a dozen strong, the team was adept at infiltrating the tightest defenses and eliminating all necessary obstacles. Only a few members of the government and military were privy to the League's identities. League members wear no distinguishing garments and held no particular rank. The only evidence of their participation in the League was a small medallion presented to each member upon induction. This secrecy was maintained until the formation of the Council. In effort to dispel the rumors and appease their new Asari partners, the Salarian Union released all classified documents pertaining to the League. The League of One was suddenly exposed and in danger of being hunted by the enemies of the Salarians. Before any harm could be done, the team mysteriously disappeared. Most assumed this was a convenient lie to help hide their identities, but a few months later, the inner cabinet was murdered. Though there was no incriminating evidence, it was clear who was responsible. Realizing the threat posed by this rogue outfit, the Special Tasks Group dispatched a team of hunters. When they didn't return, the STG dispatched 10 of its brightest operators with a broad directionary powers. Only 2 returned. They reported no evidence of the League. No further incidents were reported, and it was assumed that the League was wiped out. Some recently declassified documents, however, have suggested that there may have been a 13th member who eluded the Salarian military. Yeah, so basically, the League of One were kind of like proto-specters, although, to be honest, they seem to have been run in a much more sensible way than the specters themselves, because they were entirely clandestine. Nobody even knew, who was part of them, what exactly they were doing, how many of them are there, and so on. It's essentially the top elite of the Salarian intelligence, right? And to be honest, it's very callous, but also kind of realistic that they threw their top agents under the bus when they joined the galactic community, because obviously, the other species would have been uncomfortable with this kind of organization that, has basically no limits and acts outside the law and potentially spies on them as well. But I see that as ironic, because they ended up recreating the same thing in the Spectres, and besides, I'm pretty sure all of the species of the galaxy, even the supposed allies, spy on each other all the time. Militaries in our world do that, where, for example, it has been proven by, when Snowden leaked all of those files from the USA intelligence, it has been sort of verbatim proven. I guess everybody knew that, deep down, but that they are spying on other members of NATO, and they keep tabs on what their allies are doing, because obviously situations change, and the fact that we are allies currently doesn't necessarily mean that we are always going to be. And also, I feel like, it's just reasonable to, because there are certain things that even an allied government wouldn't likely tell you. For example, if they have internal problems, or if they have been compromised, they probably wouldn't tell you, because it's a rule of politics that you should project strength, right? But on the other hand, if you are their ally, you would like to know that. For example, if your chief ally has been compromised and are likely to fold in the case of, for example, an invasion or something, then you would like to know that beforehand and plan accordingly. Salarian special task groups. Salarian intelligence field agents are grouped into an organization called the Special Task Group. STG operators work in independent cells, performing dangerous missions such as counter-terrorism, infiltration reconnaissance, assassination, and sabotage. The STG is a proactive organization, puncturing worrisome trends before they become movements. At any time, a dozen groups are operating covertly within the lawless Terminus systems, sowing dissent among the various factions. Civilian analysts also note how troublesome hinge point individuals in Terminus system frequently meet unexpected deaths. SDG operators are feared throughout the galaxy for their clear-eyed, remorseless practicality. They are willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their mission, even if it kills civilians or results in the team's own destruction. In many ways, they are akin to the Council's specters. Recently, a number of SDG unit cells have been redeployed from Solarian Union. It is assumed they are in the Terminus system and the Attican Traverse, investigating reports of Geth activity beyond the Perseus Veil. Turian biology. The Turian homeworld, Palaven, has a metal-poor core, generating a weak magnetic field and allowing more solar radiation into the atmosphere. To deal with this, most forms of life on Palaven evolved some form of metallic exoskeleton to protect themselves. Their reflective plate-like skin makes Turians less susceptible to long-term low-level radiation exposure, but they do not possess any sort of natural armor. A Turian's thick skin does not stop projectiles or directed energy bolts. Although life on Palaven is carbon-based and oxygen-breathing, it is built on dextroamino acids. That places the Turians in a distinct minority on the galactic stage. The Quarians are the only other known sapient dextroprotein race. The food of the humans, Asarian Salarians, who evolved in levoamino acid-based biospheres, will at best pass through the Turian systems without providing any nutrition, and at worst it will trigger an allergic reaction that can be fatal if not immediately treated. Turian culture. While Turians are individuals with personal desires, their instinct is to equate the self with the group and set aside their personal desires for the good of all. Turians are taught to have a strong sense of personal accountability. The Turian honor that the other races find so remarkable. Turians are taught to own every decision they make, good or ill. The worst sin they can make in the eyes of their people is to lie about their own actions. Turians who murder will try to get away with it, but if directly questioned, most will confess to the crime. Turians have a strong inclination towards public service and self-sacrifice, so they tend to be poor entrepreneurs. To compensate, they accepted the mercantile Volus as a client race, offering protection in exchange for their fiscal expertise. The Turian military is the center of their society. It is not just an armed force, it's an all-encompassing public works organization. The military police are also the civic police. The fire brigades serve the civilian population as well as the military facilities. The Corps of Engineers build and maintain spaceports, schools, water purification plants, and power stations. The Merchant Marine ensures all the worlds get needed resources. Turian government. The Turian government is a hierarchical The Turian government is a hierarchical meritocracy. While it has great potential for misuse, this is tempered by civic duty and personal responsibilities Turians learn in childhood. Turians have 27 citizenship tiers, beginning with the civilians, client races, and children. The initial period of military service is the second tier. Formal citizenship is conferred at the third tier after boot camp. For client races, citizenship is granted after the individual musters out. Higher-ranked citizens are expected to lead and protect subordinates. Lower-ranked citizens are expected to obey and support the superiors. Promotion to another tier of citizenship is based on the personal assessment of one's superiors and co-rankers. Throughout their lives, Turians ascend to higher tiers and are occasionally demoted to lower ones. The stigma associated with demotion lies not on the individual, but on those who promoted him when he wasn't ready for the additional responsibility. This curbs the tendency to promote individuals into positions beyond their capabilities. Settling into a role and rank is not considered stagnation. Turians value knowing one's own limitations more than being ambitious. At the top are the Primarchs, who each rule a colonization cluster. The Primarchs vote on matters of national importance. They otherwise maintain a hands-off policy, trusting the citizens on each level below them to do their jobs competently. Turians enjoy broad freedoms. So long as one completes his duties and does not prevent others from completing theirs, nothing is forbidden. For example, there are no laws against recreational drug use, but if someone is unable to complete his duties due to drug use, his superiors step in. Judicial proceedings are called interventions. Peers express their concerns and try to convince the offender to change. If rehabilitation fails, Turians have no qualms about sentencing individuals to a life at hard labor for the state. So they have 27 citizenship tiers. It's pretty interesting. But also, what's interesting about this is the fact that if someone is demoted, the blame is placed on whoever promoted them to a higher station in the first place. I find that to be kind of interesting. It's kind of saying that as someone's superior, you also have the responsibility towards that person to assess their capabilities fairly, and if they fail, that reflects poorly as much or maybe even more on you than on them. Turian military doctrine. Although they lack the brutality of the Krogan, the skill of the Asari, and the virtuosity of the humans, the Turian military has formidable discipline. Officers and NCOs are what? Lifers with years of field experience. Enlisted personnel are thoroughly trained and stay calm under fire. Turian units don't break. Even if their entire line collapses, they will fall back in order, setting ambushes as they go. A popular saying holds, you will only see a Turian's back once he is dead. Boot camp begins at the 15th birthday. Soldiers receive a year of training before being assigned to a field unit. Officers train for even longer. Most serve until the age of 30, at which point they become a part of the reserves. Even if they suffer injuries preventing front-line service, most do support work behind the lines. Biotics are uncommon. While admired for their exacting skills, Biotics' motives are not fully trusted by the common soldiers. The Turians prefer to assign their Biotics to special teams called cabals. Command and control is decentralized and flexible. Individual squads can call for artillery and air support. This makes for the excellent use of combat drones for light duties and practice. They make extensive use of combat drones for light duties and practice combined arms. Infantry operates with armor supported by overhead gunships. Strategically, they are methodical and patient and dislike risky operations. Tradition is important. Each legion has a full-time staff of historians who chronicle its battle honors in detail. The oldest have records dating back to the Turian Iron Age. If a legion is destroyed in battle, it is reconstituted rather than replaced. The Turian recruit auxiliary units from conquered or absorbed minor species. Auxiliaries are generally light infantry or armored cavalry who screen and support the main Turian formations. At the conclusion of the service in the auxiliaries, recruits are granted Turian citizenship. What armored cavalry? By that they mean tanks, right? Or like they do not mean literal cavalry. Turians, the Unification War. At the time the Salarians and Asari were forming the Council, the Turians were embroiled in a bitter civil war. The Unification War, as it was later named, began with the hostilities between the colonies furthest from the Turian homeworld, Palaven. These colonies were run by local chieftains, many of whom had distanced themselves from the hierarchy. Without the galvanizing influence of the government, the colonies became increasingly isolated and xenophobic. Colonists began wearing emblems or facial markings to differentiate themselves from the members of other colonies, and open hostilities became common. When the war finally broke out, the hierarchy maintained strict diplomacy and refused to get involved. After several years of fighting, less than a dozen factions remained, and the hierarchy finally intervened. By that time, the chieftains were too weak to resist. They were forced to put an end to the fighting and renew their allegiance to the hierarchy. Though peace was restored, it took several decades for the animosity between the colonists to fade completely. To this day, most Turians still wear the facial markings of their home colonies. As a point of interest, the Turian term bare-faced referred to one who is beguiling or not to be trusted. It is also a slang term for politicians. Okay, so this refers to, I've also been founding, Turian colony insignia, and it is linked with this civil war between the different colonies. Have I read that? I don't think so, actually. Protheans, the beacon. The beacon was a Protean artifact unearthed on the Alliance colony of Eden Prime. Its resemblance to the Protean databanks recovered on Mars provoked immediate interest from the Alliance and the Citadel Council. It proved to be a solid-state data storage device, part of the galaxy-spanning comm network similar to the modern extranet. Intact Protean paleo technology is rare. The beacon seemed to promise another quantum leap of technology, akin to the discovery of the mass effect drive and relays. Unfortunately, the beacon also drew the attention of the rogue Spectre, Saren Arterius, and his synthetic allies, the Geth. A dawn raid by his flagship Sovereign resulted in hundreds of civilian casualties. The beacon was badly damaged. The motives behind the attack are still being investigated. During the operation, the beacon fired a pulse of energy at the executive officer of the Alliance frigate Normandy. Lieutenant Commander Shepard survived and appears to have suffered no ill effects. Afterwards, the beacon fell inert. The mechanism appears to be dead. Proteans, the Cipher. The Protean beacon downloaded its knowledge into Lieutenant Commander Shepard on Eden Prime, causing confusing dreams and visions. While the imagery is becoming clearer with time, the meaning of the beacon communication remains elusive. It has been suggested that the Protean data recording is highly dependent on certain point of view, with what Carl Jung described as collective unconscious. The cipher needed to comprehend the images implanted in Shepard's mind is the cultural knowledge of a Protean, the archetypes, biological instincts, and common experiences universal to the race. Since the Proteans have been dead for millennia, it might be impossible to acquire this cipher. Protean data disks. Despite all evidence confirming the existence of the Proteans, little is known about their culture and society. From time to time, dig sites will yield new clues, but after 50,000 years of decay, little of value is unearthed. Recent research has focused on the discovery of Protean data disks. On their own, they are frail and rarely found in one piece. Occasionally, however, an intact disk will be discovered within a console or a reading device. To date, only over 3 dozen disks have been recovered, and a few of those have been restored to the point where researchers can begin analyzing them. Though it might be some time before the scientists discovered a way to transfer the data of the disks, they are currently considered the most tangible leads for learning more about the Protean culture. Protean Mars ruins. After 20 years of manned research outposts and nearly a century of robotic exploration, the European Space Agency's Lower City became the first permanent settlement on Mars in 2103. Within a decade, the United States and China had founded a permanent settlement as well. The South Polar region of Prometei Planum developed a Bermuda Triangle reputation. Satellites detected intermittent mass concentrations and magnetic field shifts. In 2148, prospectors working near the Sado crater discovered an underground complex, a Protean observation post. The odd phenomena were generated by the operation and discharge of a Mass Effect core struggling to function despite 50 millennia of neglect. Earth was electrified by the news. Humanity was unequivocally not alone. While courts battled over who owned the ruins, the international scientific community coordinated a massive effort to access, translate, and interpret the databanks covered from the facility. The facility proved to be a biosciences observation post, built when the Homo sapiens were first evolving on Earth. While the motives of the Proteans are not certain, Translated records indicate that the facility was in regular communication with the automated observation platforms in Earth orbit and on the lunar near side. The half-dozen Mass Effect spaceships found in the facility were presumably used for first-hand observation. So this is interesting because it ties in with those stories of alien abductions that we have in our world, because it turns out that the Protheans have been observing humanity, for thousands of years. And presumably also making first-hand observations sometimes, by which I presume, abducting people to study them. Geth armatures. Armatures are quadruped, all-terrain heavy weapon platforms, akin to the armored fighting vehicles of other races. Geth being synthetic intelligence, armatures are not crude vehicles, but intelligent entities capable of independent decision-making and learning. Armatures are equipped with a heavy kinetic barrier. Their main cannon, mounted at the articulated head turret, appears to be a highly efficient conventional mass accelerator. It is capable of firing in anti-personnel and anti-tank modes. Some armatures carry drones into battle, presumably for reconnaissance purposes. Others host a swarm of insect-sized repair bots. Geth hoppers. The Geth models, collectively dubbed hoppers by the Alliance forces, are electronic warfare platforms. They can project electromagnetic radiation across a broad spectrum as an offensive weapon. They can also perform cyber warfare attacks against the onboard computers of body armor, heart suits, and weapons, adversely affecting their performance. The structure of the hoppers consists of an advanced and highly elastic artificial muscle materials. This allows the hopper to compress its entire body for a powerful leap. Hoppers also have thousands of molecule scale barbs on the surfaces of their hands and feet, which can be used to cling to walls and ceilings. Hoppers are very difficult targets, leaping from one surface to another in rapid succession. The Quarians have no records of any Geth models similar to hoppers. This new morphotype must have been developed in the last 300 years by the Geth themselves. This is troubling proof that the Geth are continuing to move towards technological singularity. Experts in synthetic life are intrigued that hoppers appear to be even more organic than the baseline Geth. The identified subtypes of hoppers have been codenamed Sapper, Stalker, and Ghost. Krogan culture. The harsh Krogan homeworld conditioned the Krogan's psychology for toughness, just as it did the body. Krogans have always had the tendency to be selfish, unsympathetic, and blunt. They respect strength and self-reliance, and are neither surprised nor offended by treachery. The weak and selfless do not live long. In their culture, looking out for number one is simply the matter of course. After their defeat in the rebellions, the very concept of Krogan leadership was discredited. Where a warlord could once command enough powers to bring an entire solar system to heel and become overlord, these days is rare for a single leader to have more than 1,000 warriors who swear allegiance to him. Most Krogans trust and serve no one but themselves. The solitary attitude stems in part from a deep sense of fatalism and futility, a profound social effect of the genophage that caused the Krogan numbers to dwindle to a relative handful. Not only are they angry at the entire galaxy that seems out to get them, the Krogans are also generally pessimistic about their race's chances of survival. The surviving Krogan see no point in building for the future. There will be no future. The Krogans live in an attitude of kill, pillage, and be selfish, for tomorrow we will die. Krogan genophage. The genophage bioweapon was created at the end of the Krogan rebellions. From the start, the Krogan had overwhelmed the Council. Only timely first contact with the Turians saved Council races. The Turians fought the Krogans to a standstill, but sheer weight of the Krogan numbers indicated that the war could not be won through conventional means. the Turians collaborated with the Salarians to genetically engineer a counter to the rapid breeding of the Krogan. The genophage virus gained the energy to replicate by eating key genetic sequences. Every cell in every Krogan had to be altered for the weapon to be foolproof, otherwise the Krogan could have used gene therapy to fix the affected issues. Once a genophage strain could find no more genes to eat, it would starve and die, limiting spin-off mutation and contamination. This created genetic flaw is hereditary. The Stellarians believed that the genophage would be used as a deterrent, a position that the Turians viewed as naive. Once the project was complete, the Turians mass-produced and deployed it. The Krogan homeworld, their colonies, and all occupied worlds were infected. The resulting mutation made only 1 in 1,000 Krogan pregnancies carry to term. It did not reduce fertility, but offspring viability. The rare females able to carry children to term became prizes to Krogan warlords who were fought brutal battles over. The Krogans are a shadow of their former glory. While the rebellions took place centuries ago, they are constantly reminded of the horror of the genophage and their inability to counter it. The release of the genophage is still controversial, bitterly debated in many circles. Yeah, I do personally happen to think it's obviously majorly fucked up, because it's essentially genocide. It's just prolonged, which in a way is kind of even worse, because as it says here, and this is something the game flip-flops on a little bit, it's a bit inconsistent between the different entries in the franchise, but as it says here, as it was originally conceived and presented to you, the genophage doesn't really prevent conception of children. It just kills them. It just they do conceive children, but they cannot carry them to term, so most of them are stillborn. So imagine having although I guess they do not carry them, like I'm pretty sure they are they lay eggs, but imagine having 1,000 upon 1,000 of dead fetuses. Like, it's not that you can't get pregnant or can't get a fertilized egg or whatever, however their biology exactly works. To be honest, it should be explained somewhere around here. Maybe it will be later. But imagine, it's not that you can't conceive a child, it's just that they die en masse. So their entire culture is surrounded by dead fetuses. Like, there are mountains of them, as they are, fruitlessly trying to get live children. Most of them just die. It's not that they are infertile, it's that they cannot get their children to live, which is much more depressing, it seems to me. Like, it would be very, very easy for such a society to fall into nihilism, which is exactly what happens to them, and what Rex himself commented on. They just don't care, because they are surrounded by such a massive amount of death of their own children, and they seem to think there is no future for them, and in the long term there does not seem to be. Because, to be honest, from the way it is described, I'm not sure. I think it was developed as a genocide weapon. It's not supposed to even keep their population stable. I don't think they even replace themselves on the correct race to keep a stable population, especially because they kill each other a lot and also die a lot. So yeah, pretty fucked up. The game will actually comment more about the genocide as it goes on, the genophage, so I will comment upon it then as well. Krogan military doctrine. Traditional Krogan tactics were built on the attritional mass unit warfare. Equipped with cheap, rugged gear, troop formations were powerful but inflexible. Command and control was very centralized. Soldiers in the field who saw a target contacted their commanders behind the lines to arrange fire support. Since the Genophage, the Krogan can no longer afford the casualties of the old Horde attacks. The Battlemasters are a match for any 10 soldiers of another species. To a Battlemaster, killing is a science. They focus on developing a clean brute force economy of motion that exploits their brutal strength to incapacitate enemies with swift single blow of overwhelming power. The change of focus from mass unit warfare to maximal efficiency has increased employment demand in the fields of security and muscle for hire. Due to the unsavory reputation of the Krogan, most of those jobs are on the far side of the law. Battlemasters are not spit and posh, but they do believe in being well armed and equipped, preferably with a gun for each limb. They are callous and brutal, but methodical and disciplined. They use their means at their disposal to achieve their goals, no matter how reprehensible. Hostage-taking and genocide are acceptable means to ensure a quiet occupation, with a few Krogan casualties. The Krogans serving Saren's forces appear to be returning to the old style of mass attritional combat. They also work in close cooperation with the supporting Geth units, who fill the roles occupied by combat drones in other armies. Biotics are rare among the Krogan. Those that do exist are viewed with suspicion and fear. The Krogan see the aura of fear as useful quality for an officer and often promote them. Combat drones and other high-tech equipment are likewise in short supply. Quarian economy. The migrant fleet has little economic base, operating in a state of perpetual hand-to-mouth. While the Quarian ships include light manufacturing and assembly plants, they lack heavy industry such as refining or shipbuilding. The fleet has tankers for water purification and oxygen cracking, but the space-intensive nature of agriculture limits food production. A single disaster could destroy the fragile balance. The Quarians earn income in creative ways, because their government is obliged to provide food, water and air and medical support for every individual. The Conclave strategically determines the course of the fleet to bring in resources and income. A species who suspects the migrant fleet is heading towards their space often offers a gift of surplus starships, fuel and resources to convince the Conclave to alter course. As the fleet passes through a system, swarms of mining vessels work over asteroids for metals and silicous materials, and cometary bodies of water, ice, and organics. Quarian miners are adept at locating and strip mining spaceborne resources. This sparks conflict with the corporations already working in the system. Large mining concerns spend millions on lobbyists and public relations, portraying the Quarians as locusts, devouring the resources of a system before moving on. The greatest asset of the Quarians is their rarefied skills. Most are experienced miners. Due to the life of perpetual salvage and repair, they are skilled engineers and technicians. More than once, the very corporations that lobby against the Quarians have made backroom deals with the fleet, arranging for skilled Quarians to fill space engineering jobs that other species would demand higher wages for. Quarians are widely hated among the working classes. "The Quarians are coming to take our jobs" is a common response to the fleet's approach. So this is pretty like the Quarians kind of have a space Roma undertone to them. You know, they are nomadic, and they are widely perceived, stereotyped as thieves, and when they are approaching a certain region, they are actually offered gifts just to fuck off. Like it's like in Trailer Park Boys, the other species are like, "I'm going to give you $100 to fuck off." So, yeah, the Quarian government. Due to the Quarians' precarious existence and the need to enforce strict rationing, government is somewhat autocratic. The migrant fleet's operations are directed by the Admiralty, a board of 5 military officers who are advised by the legislative body called the Conclave. Each vessel in the fleet has the right to send representatives to the Conclave aboard the flagship. The number of representatives is based on the crew size. Larger clans with bigger ships and more votes form the cores of politic blocs. Opposition comes from the Outsider Coalition, which delegates from the thousands of smaller ships. The Admiralty defers to the Conclave's decisions in most circumstances. However, if all 5 members agree that the Conclave decision jeopardizes the survival of the fleet and cannot get the Conclave to address their concerns, they have the right to summarily overturn the legislative decision. After the Admiralty uses this extraordinary power, they must resign. If the Admiralty does not step down after using the veto, the rest of the military is obliged to arrest them. Each ship captain has authority over his vessel, but is advised by the elected civilian council, just as the Admiralty is advised by the Conclave. This relationship may range from cooperation to polite tolerance to outright hostility, but any captain who overrules his council without good reason is relieved of command by the Admiralty. Many Quarian ships are owned by clans who pool their resources to purchase used vessels from private sellers. Large ships are prestigious for big rich clans, but small ships mean status for small clans with enough personal wealth to afford a private vessel. Clan vessel captains are not subject to the dismissal by the Admiralty. Abusive captains are a family problem if they do not disrupt the operations of the fleet. In Quarian law and defense. Although the Conclave establishes civil law as much as any planet-based democracy, enforcement and trials are more unique. After their flight from the Geth, there were few constables to police the millions of civilians aboard the fleet, so the Navy parceled out Marine squads to maintain order and enforce the law. Today, the Quarian Marines have evolved training and tactics akin to civilian police, but remain adept at combat in confined spaces of a starship and fully under the command of the military. Once taken into custody, the accused is brought before the ship's captain for judgment. While the ship's council may take recommendations, tradition holds that the captain has absolute authority in the matters of discipline. Most are lenient, assigning additional or more odious maintenance tasks aboard the ships. Persistent recidivists are accidentally left on the next habitable world. This practice of abandoning criminals on other people's planet is a point of friction between the Quarians and the systems they pass through. Captains rarely have another choice. With space and resources at a premium, supporting a non-productive prison population is not an option. In the early years, many Quarian freighters were armed and used as irregular privateers. Civilian ships still show strong preference for armament, making them unpopular targets for pirates. Though they have rebuilt their military, there are still mere hundreds of warships to protect tens of thousands of ships. The Quarian Navy follows strict routines of patrol and takes no chances. If the intent of an approaching ship cannot be ascertained, they shoot to kill. Now, this is actually pretty fucked up that they exile their criminals on the worlds that belong to other species. Like, basically they drop their most dangerous criminals on other people's property, and so that they are their problem. Like, it says here that they have no alternative, but it seems to me they have. The alternative is capital punishment. You know, I'm not generally such a big fan of capital punishment, but I definitely think in this case it would be more justified than dropping your dangerous criminals onto other people's land. Like, that's seriously wrong, and in fact, I can feel like that would feed to the negative stereotype towards the Quarians. Like, if someone dropped, you know, a dangerous criminal in my backyard and then fucked off to whatever, I probably wouldn't have a very great opinion of the person who did that. Quarian Migrant Fleet. The Migrant Fleet is the largest concentration of starfaring vessels in the galaxy, sprawling across millions of kilometers. It can take days for the entire fleet to pass through a mass relay. When the Quarians fled their homeworld, the fleet was a motley aggregation of freighters, shuttles, industrial vessels, and the odd warship. After 3 centuries, all have been modified to support a larger crew as comfortably as possible. As the Quarians achieved stability, they began weeding out the ships least suitable for the long-term habitation, selling them and pooling the money to buy larger and more space-worthy hulls. The process is ongoing, as vessels wear out and break down. While some ships enjoy dedicated cabins with full privacy and sanitary facilities, many more are former freighters whose cargo bays and containers are pressured and divided into family spaces using a simple metal cubicle bulkheads. The Quarians enliven these austere spaces with colorful quilts and tapestries, which also help muffle sound. The day-to-day operation of the fleet, the traffic control, station keeping, and supply distribution and so on, are under military jurisdiction. Though ship's captains have the authority to deviate from the assigned positions and may leave the fleet at any time, they are assumed to do so at their own risk. As the migrant fleet moves around the galaxy, many ships split out to pursue individual goals, returning days or years later. Quarian religion. The ancient Quarians practiced ancestor worship. Even after abandoning faith for secularism, Quarians continued to revere the wisdom of the elders. As time passed and technology advanced, they inevitably turned their knowledge to the preserving of personalities and memories of the elderly as computer virtual intelligences. These recordings became a repository of knowledge and wisdom stored in the central databank and available through any extranet connection. They held no illusion that this was a form of immortality. Like all virtual intelligences, their electronically preserved ancestors were not truly sapient. They were considered a surmountable problem. Sapience could surely be reduced to simple mathematics. The Quarians began extensive research into creating artificial intelligence so that they could learn to escape the bounds of mortality and give ancestral records true awareness. Unfortunately for the Quarians, the life the Quarians created did not accept the same truths as they did. The Geth destroyed the ancestor databanks when they took over. In the centuries since they evacuated their homeworld, most Quarians have returned to the religion in various forms. Many believe that the rise of the Geth and the destruction of their ancestors were chastisement for arrogantly forsaking the old ways and venerating the self-made idols. Others have a more philosophical outlook, believing that their race was indeed arrogant, but no supernatural agency lay behind the Geth revolt. Rather, the Quarians' actions wrought their own doom. Either way, every Quarian would agree that their own hubris cost them their homeworld. Okay, so this is actually interesting because this is something I didn't remember. I didn't remember the fact that originally the Quarians didn't necessarily want to create AI to have a slave race. They wanted to apparently perfect it so that they could achieve immortality by digitizing their consciousness, which is a bit of a less fucked up goal, actually. Not that it makes what they did to the Geth any better, and I rather intensely dislike the Quarians for their lack of self-awareness in how fucked up the treatment of the Geth was, but the games will comment on that quite extensively, so I'll get back to that topic when that happens. Genetic engineering. In the 22nd century, manipulation of the human genome became commonplace. Techniques of genetic engineering advanced to the point where the rich could custom build fetuses that grew into stronger, smarter, and more attractive adults. In more permissive regions, custom-designed life forms and uplifted animals occupied an ill-defined niche between property and a sapient being. Travels to planets with unique forms of life brought an awareness to Earth's unique biodiversity that could be lost if spliced or hybridized to gain useful alien qualities. The Genetic Heritage Act was passed by the System Alliance Parliament in 2161. It imposed sharp restrictions on controversial use of genetic engineering, but provided government subsidies for beneficial applications. Screening and therapy. Most governments provide free assessment and corrective therapy for genetic diseases in prospective parents. This has nearly eliminated every form of cystic fibrosis, everything from cystic fibrosis to nearsightedness. The earlier screening and therapy is performed, the more comprehensive the results. Though ideally performed on an artificially fertilized zygotes in a lab, procedures are available for embryos in the womb and for newborns, out of respect for personal beliefs. Enhancement. Improvement of natural human abilities is legal, but adding new abilities is not. Treatments to improve strength, reflexes, and mental acuity or appearance are permitted. Adding a tail or the ability to digest cellulose is not. Some genetic enhancement is provided for free to the Alliance military recruits, but the average citizen must pay for the privilege. The process can take years to reach fruition in an adult. Engineering. Artificial hybridization of genes from compatible non-human species with the human genetic code is illegal. Creation of designed life is broadly legal and mainly used for terraforming and medical applications, but sentient creatures are heavily regulated, and creation of sapient life is outlawed by both the Systems Alliance and the CITADEL Council. Okay, this is actually pretty interesting as far as world building is concerned, because apparently in the before it was regulated, people have attempted to create like half sentient animals. It talks here about uplifting animals. It's a bit fucked up, to be honest, because it says it even brings it up here when it says they occupied an ill-defined niche between property and sentient being. Because obviously, if your dog was sentient, then I think it would be wrong to own him. So yeah, that's pretty weird. And also, the whole concept of like genetic engineering that enhances human ability is kind of dangerous in that I feel it would create an insurmountable rift between the rich and poor, because ultimately the rich would make themselves into demigods. Like they wouldn't just be rich. Some people would say that even nowadays, in reality, being rich is already kind of a superpower. Like, if you are rich, you have, unprecedented potential and unprecedented access to, to things that can bring your life fulfillment compared to being poor. But in the events described here, you can literally make yourself stronger, faster, more agile, just physically more able than the poor. I feel like that's dangerous. Although, as I said, you could argue that even nowadays, if you're rich, or especially if you take the extremes of both of those angles, you're already kind of, there's already an insurmountable rift between the really poor and the really rich. They have lived experiences that are so different that probably a poor alien and a poor human might have a more understandable lived experience than a very rich human and a very poor human. Human diplomatic relations. Humanity has encountered many new galactic species. Wars have been a few, but mistrust is rife. Politically, the Alliance is a peaceful trade partner of the Turians. As practical matter, however, there is simmering antagonism and bigotry between the both populations over the First Contact War of 2157. The Alliance enjoys good relations with the Asari, though many privately believe that the matriarchs are aristocratic and overcautious. Though humans know better than to unconditionally trust any Salarian, their shared reckless ways make them natural allies against the conservative Turians and the Asari. The Krogan have no unified government, but individuals are generally treated as potential criminals, a reputation most Krogan enjoy living down to. The Alliance has no formal contact with the Quarians. The migrant fleet has not yet passed through any human-settled system. The Batarians are rivals for the control of the Skillian Verge. They severed their treaties with the Citadel to prosecute a colonial conflict against the Alliance. Officially there is no war, but neither is there any peace. Systems Alliance Geological Survey. As the human race expands its territory and raises the general standard of living, demands for industrial resources continues to grow. Many planets, moons and asteroids contain a wealth of resources, but many systems have barely been charted, let alone thoroughly surveyed. Unmanned probes are one solution, but they are often lost to space hazards, unforeseen consequences or theft by salvagers. In recent years, the Alliance Geological Service has offered bounties to private individuals or teams willing to perform mineralogical surveys on the frontier. The survey data is made publicly available to further corporate development. Due to the cost of travel and the dangers of operating on hostile worlds, it is rarely a profitable endeavor. Light metals, metals with a low atomic weight, are often used in construction of spacecraft and vehicles. Heavy metals, metals with a higher atomic weight, are used to construct equipment components. The platinum group elements are particularly useful. Rare earths, most useful materials in the category are radioactives or magnets. Gases, various gases are required to support all known forms of sapient life. Some are commonly used as fuel. Systems Alliance Military Doctrine. The Alliance military is of great concern to the galaxy. At first contact with the Turians, they were completely inexperienced. Turian disdain changed to respect after the relief of Shang-Chi, where the humans surprised them with novel technologies and tactics. The human devotion to understanding and adapting to modern space warfare stunned the State Council races. For hundreds of years, they had lived behind the secure walls of long-proven technologies and tactics. The Council regards the Alliance as a sleeping giant. Less than 3% of humans volunteer to serve in their military, a lower proportion than any other species. While competent, Alliance soldiers are neither as professional as the Turians, nor as skilled as the Asari. Their strength lies in fire support, flexibility and speed. They make up for the lack of numbers with sophisticated technical support, VIs, drones, artillery, electronic warfare, and emphasis on mobility and individual initiative. Their doctrine is not based on absorbing and dishing out heavy shocks like the Turian or the Krogan. Rather, they bypass the enemy's strong points and launch deep into their rear, cutting supply lines and destroying headquarters with support units, leaving the enemies to wither on the vine. On defense, the human military is a rapid reaction force that lives by the Sun Tzu maxim: he who tries to defend everything defends nothing. Garrisons are intended for scouting rather than combat, avoiding engagement to observe and report on the invaders using drones. The token garrisons on human colonies make it easy for alien powers to secure them, for which the Alliance media criticizes the military. However, the powerful fleets stationed at the phase gates nexuses, such as the Arcturus, are just a few hours or days from any colony within the sphere of responsibility. In the event of an attack, they respond with overwhelming force. Systems Alliance military ranks. The Alliance uses a modified version of the ranking system that has existed for hundreds of years. Soldiers are classified into non-commissioned officers, NCOs, and are classified into rank-and-file enlisted personnel, experienced non-commissioned officers, and specialty trained officers. The divide between the naval personnel and ground forces is small. The ground units are a specialized branch of the fleet, just as fighter squadrons are. The unity of command is imposed by the futility of fighting without the control of the orbit. Without the Navy, any army is pointless. The Marines, as a matter of pride, maintain some of their traditional ranks and titles. For example, Marines have privates and corporals instead of servicemen. In the ascending order of responsibility, the ranks of the Alliance are servicemen 3rd class, private 2nd class, servicemen blah blah blah, corporal. NCOs, Service Chief, Gunnery Chief, Operations Chief. Officers, 2nd Lieutenant, 1st Lieutenant, Staff Lieutenant, Lieutenant Commander, Staff Commander, Captain Major, Rear Admiral or General, Admiral and Fleet Admiral. N7. The Alliance Military Vocational Code System classified the career path of all serving personnel. The MVC consists of one letter and one number. A soldier's MVC indicates proficiency, not rank. The letters note career paths. The number indicates the level of experience, as indicated by the service record, technical scores and recommendations. All 26 letters are used, and numbers run from 1 to 7. N is the letter code for the Special Forces personnel. Stations. Arcturus Station. Arcturus Station is the gateway to the Soul, a 5-kilometer diameter Stanford-Taurus-type space station at the trading Lagrange point of the gas giant Themis. Construction of the Arcturus Station began in the 2151 and concluded in 2162. It was inaugurated in 2156 and best served as the military and political headquarters of the Alliance systems from the First Contact War until present. When humanity activated the Charon mass relay in 2149, it led to Arcturus, 36 years from Sol, Earth's sun. Arcturus is the 3rd biggest star seen from Earth. It is an ancient red giant from the generation born before Sol. Its worlds are either gas giants or ice chunks. While some rocky debris exists, the metal content is 25% lower than normal. To build Arcturus Station, metallic asteroids were towed through the mass relays to the construction site. Many of those asteroids remain near the station, their mined-out areas home to transient populations. The expense of bringing construction material into the system was acceptable due to the strategic value. With 3 primary mass relays in addition to the secondary one to Sol, Arcturus is a major communications and military choke point. The Alliance First Fleet is based in Arcturus, where it can be used to guard the gates to Sol and react to incursions in the 3 connected clusters. The station also hosts the System Alliance Parliament and the System Alliance Military Headquarters. It has a permanent population of approximately 45,000 people. Arcturus is actually from the galactic halo, one of the cluster of 52 stars that are crashing through the disk of the galaxy. In 1 billion years, Arcturus will be sailing through the depths of extragalactic dark space. Station, Gagarin Station. Gagarin Station is the largest deep space station built by humanity, a Bernal sphere design with a 500-meter diameter habitable area. It was constructed beyond Pluto, nearly 80 astronomical units, 12 billion kilometers from Sol. Moving crew and material to the location bankrupted most of the backers. Gagarin was placed in the inner edge of the heliopause, the point where the solar wind can no longer push back the interstellar medium. It was built to test a number of faster-than-light drive principles that theoretically could only occur in interstellar space. The station was nicknamed Jump Zero, as it was intended to be the jumping-off point for humanity's expansion into the galaxy. Shortly after the station was completed, the Prothean ruins were discovered on Mars, rendering the entire effort moot. After struggling to make a profit for a decade, Gagarin was sold to the System Alliance in 2159 for a fraction of its construction costs. The Alliance refurbished it as a research and training center for the recently discovered biotic phenomenon. In 2169, the biotic acclimation and training program was shut down, and Gagarin became a general research facility. Its remote and intentional isolation from the extranet makes it popular for dangerous research, particularly in the field of artificial intelligence. Humanity's first stable AI, the Alliance-sponsored ELIZA, achieved sapience at Gagarin in 2172. Wait, what? But is that a secret? That is illegal, right? According to council law. So what happened with it afterwards? Like, did we create it and then immediately, just to prove that we can, and then immediately destroyed it? Today, Gagarin Station has a permanent population of approximately 9,000. A plan has been proposed to move it out of the gravitationally stable bicenter point between Pluto and the Charon Relay, allowing for it to serve as a gateway between the Sol and the Arcturus systems. The high cost of safely moving its mass has delayed this indefinitely. FTL Drive appearance. A new space travelers asks, why does it look like outside a ship? No, what does it look like outside a ship moving at faster than light speed? Part of the answer can be seen in a simple pane of glass. Light travels slower through the glass than it does through the open air. Light also moves slower in conventional spaces than it does in high-speed mass effect fields. This causes refraction. Any light entering at an angle is bent and separated into a spectrum. Objects outside the ship will appear refracted. The greater the difference between the objective exterior and subjective interior speeds of light, the greater the refraction. As the subjective speed of light is raised within the field, objects outside will appear to redshift, eventually becoming visible only to radio telescope antenna. High-energy electromagnetic sources, normally hidden to the eye, become visible in the high blue spectrum. As the speed of light continues to be raised, X-ray, gamma-ray, and eventually cosmic ray sources become visible. Stars will be replaced by pulsars, the acceleration disks of black holes, quasars, and gamma-ray bursts. To an outside observer, a ship with a Mass Effect drive envelope appears blue-shifted. If within a field that allows travel at twice the speed of light, any radiation it emits has twice the energy as normal. If the ship is in a field of about 200 times the speed of light, it radiates visible light as X-rays and gamma rays, and the infrared heat from the hull is blue-shifted into the visible spectrum or higher. Ships moving at FTL are visible at great distances, though their signature will only propagate at the speed of light. FTL drive change. As positive or negative current is passed through the FTL drive core, it acquires a static electrical charge. Drives can be operated on average of 50 hours before they reach charge saturation. The charge proportional to the magnitude of mass is proportional to the magnitude of mass reduction. A heavier or faster ship reaches saturation more quickly. If the charge is allowed to build up, the core will discharge into the hull of the ship. All ungrounded crew members are fried to a crisp. All electronic systems are burned out, and the metal bulkheads might be melted or fused together. The safest way to discharge a core is to land on a planet and establish a connection to the ground, like a lightning rod. Large vessels like dreadnoughts cannot land and must discharge into the planetary magnetic field. The ship passes the charge from the drive core to the exterior armored hull, then dives into the magnetic field. As the hull discharges, sheets of lightning jump away into the field, creating beautiful auroral displays on the planet. The ship must retract its sensors and weapons while dumping the charge to prevent damage, leaving it blind and helpless. Discharging at a moon with a weak magnetic field can take days. discharging at a powerful field of a gas giant might require less than an hour. Deep space facilities such as the Citadel often have several discharge facilities for visiting ships. Space combat endurance. Heat limits the length and intensity of ship-to-ship combat. Starships generate enormous heat when they fire high-energy weapons, perform maneuvering burns, and run on-board combat electronics. In combat, warships produce heat more quickly than they can disperse it. As heat builds up within a vessel, the crewed spaces become increasingly uncomfortable. Before the heat reaches critical levels, a ship must win or retreat by using the FTL. After an FTL run, the ship halts, shuts down non-essential systems, and activates the heat radiation gear. Combat endurance varies by ship design and by the battle's location. Battles in the deep cold of interstellar space can go by some time, and engagements close to a star are brief. Since habitable worlds are usually close to a star, battles over them are frantic. Space combat, general tactics. Shells lofted by surface navies. What? Shells lofted by surface navies crash back to Earth when their acceleration is overwhelmed by the gravity and air resistance. In space, a projectile has unlimited range. It will keep moving until it hits something. A practical gunnery range is determined by the velocity of the attacker's ordnance and the maneuverability of the target. Beyond a certain range, a small ship's ability to dodge trumps and Beyond a certain range, a small ship's ability to dodge trumps a larger attacker's projectile speed. The longest range combat occurs between dreadnoughts, whose projectiles have the highest velocity but are the least maneuverable. The shortest range combat is between frigates, who have the slower projectile velocity and the highest maneuverability. Opposing dreadnoughts can open with a main gun artillery duel at an extreme range of tens of thousands of kilometers. The fleets close, maintaining evasive lateral motion while keeping their bow guns facing the enemy. Fighters are launched to attempt to close to disruptor torpedo range. Cautious admirals weaken the enemy with ranged fire and freighter strikes before committing to close action. Aggressive commanders advance so cruisers and frigates can engage. At long range, the main guns of the cruisers become useful. Friendly interceptors engage enemy fighters until the attackers enter the range of the ship-based Guardian fire. Dreadnoughts fire from the rear, screened by smaller ships. Commanders must decide whether to commit to a general melee or retreat into FTL. At medium range, ships can use broadside guns. Fleets intermingle and it becomes difficult to retreat in order. Ships with damaged kinetic barriers are vulnerable to Wolfpack frigate flotillas that speed through the battle space. Only fighters and frigates enter close knife fight ranges of 10 or fewer kilometers. Fighters lose their disruptor torpedoes, bringing down a ship's kinetic barriers, allowing it to be swarmed by frigates. Guardian lasers become viable weapons, swatting down fighters and boiling away warship armor. Neither dreadnoughts nor cruisers can use their main gun at close range. Laying the bow on a moving target becomes impossible. Superheated thruster exhaust becomes a hazard. So what is specifically pretty interesting about combat in space is the exact fact that once you fire your gun on a starship, it will essentially go forever. So targeting is extremely important. Targeting is extremely important even in Earth conditions, because you wouldn't want to hit something else. But if the field is overall clear, the shell will just fall to the ground after some distance. Whereas in space, it will literally go on forever until it hits something. it can hit, you know, if you fire like in deep space, the shell can go, you know, to a whole freaking different place in a different like on a different planet or whatever. A guy is like flying off of a planet and is hit by a shell from a ship that has been fired in a different freaking solar system. So that's pretty that's pretty hilarious, and also kind of horrifying. The consequences of a potential misfire in space. Space combat, planetary assaults. Planetary assaults are complicated if the target is a habitable garden world. The attackers cannot approach the defenders straight on. The Citadel conventions prohibit the use of larger kinetic impactors against habitable worlds. In a straight-on attack, any misses plow into the planet behind the defending fleet. If the defenders position themselves between the attackers and the planet, they can fire at will, while the attacker risks hitting the planet. Successful assaults on the garden world hinges upon the up-to-date intelligence. Attackers need to determine whether the enemy defenses are, and so that they may approach from an angle that allows them to fire with no danger of collateral damage. Note that this is not necessary for hostile worlds. Once control of the orbit has been lost, defensive garrisons disperse into the wilderness. An enemy with orbital superiority can bombard the surface forces with impunity. The best option for defenders is to hide and collect reconnaissance in anticipation of relief forces. Given the size of the planet, it is impractical to garrison the entire conquered world. Fortunately, colonization efforts tend to focus on building up a dozen or fewer areas. Ground forces occupy the spaceports, industrial facilities, and major population centers. The wilderness is patrolled by unmanned aerial vehicles and satellite reconnaissance. If a defender unit is spotted, air-mobile rapid deployment units and satellite artillery are used to pin it down and destroy them. Starship crew considerations. Cabins give each individual 10 cubic meters of space. On larger vessels, private rooms are common. As ships get smaller, the number of crew packed into a single wardroom increases. Asari prefer shared spaces even on larger vessels, while Krogan territorial instincts make it impossible for them to cohabitate even on the smallest ships. On smaller vessels, hot bunking is the norm. Crew members assigned to different watches share the same bunk. When one gets off duty, he wakes up the person in the bunk. While the crewman is on duty, the first gets his rack time. Spacecraft compartments can be isolated by airtight doors in the case of decompression. The cinematic vision of explosive decompression is a fiction. Hold compartments either take enough damage that occupants are killed instantly, or leak slowly enough that they would be able to reach protective gear. Compartments are equipped with the emergency life support apparatus, fireproof plastic bubbles with air bottles. Small when stowed, ELSA comfortably accommodates one individual inflated. Damage control procedures cut off ventilation to burning compartments. Without oxygen to consume, fires die in seconds. The compartment is then repressurized afterwards for crew recovery. Mass effect fields create an artificial gravity, AGRAV, below the decks, preventing muscle atrophy and bone loss in 0G. Larger vessels arrange their decks perpendicular to the thrust axis. The highest decks are at the bow and the lowest at the engines. This allows AGRAV to work with the inertial effects of the thrust. Ships that can land arrange their decks laterally so that the crew can move about while the vessel is on the ground. Warships normally turn off their aircraft systems during combat, reducing the heat generated by the systems and increasing combat endurance. To provide a point of reference for navigating in 0G, floors are painted a different color from the walls and ceilings. That last part is interesting. I need to take a look at that. Actually, let's do that just now. Is the floor painted in a different color? Yeah, I guess. The floor is like light and the ceiling is black. Although, to be honest, it's not as evident at first glance, I would say. Because there's also a lot of panels on the ceiling. And if the lights were off, this would look considerably darker. So overall, I wouldn't say this design holds up very much in accordance with what the Codex says. Starships heat management. Dispersal of heat generated by onboard systems is a critical issue for a ship. If it cannot deal with heat, the crew might be cooked within the hull. Radiation is the only way to shed heat in a vacuum. Civilian vessels utilize large, fragile radiator panels that are impossible to armor. Warships use diffuse radiator arrays, DRAs, ceramic strips along the exterior of the armored hull. These make the ship appear striped to thermographic sensors. Since the arrangement of the strips depends on the internal configuration of the ship, the patterns for each vessel are unique and striking. On older ships, the DRA strips could become red or white hot, dubbed tiger stripes or war paint by humans. The glowing DRA had a psychological impact on pirates and irregular forces. Strip radiators are not as efficient as panels, but if damaged by an enemy fire, the ship only loses a small portion of its total radiator capacity. In most cases, the vessel's DRA alone allows it to cruise with no difficulties. Operations deep within a solar system can cause problems. A ship engaged in combat can produce titanic amounts of heat from maneuvering burns and weapons fire. When fighting in a high heat environment, warships employ high-efficiency droplet heat sinks. In a droplet system, tanks of liquid sodium or lithium absorb heat within the ship. The liquid is vented from spray nozzles near the bow at a thin sheet of millions of micrometer scale droplets. The droplets are caught by the stern and cycled into the system. A droplet system can sink 10 to 100 times as much heat as DRI strips. Droplet sheets resemble a surface ship's wake through the water. The wake peels out in a sharp turn, spreading a fan of droplets as the ship changes vectors and leaves the coolant behind. Vehicles, combat drones. Drones are small robots used to support and supplement organic soldiers on the battlefield. They have no artificial intelligence of any kind, but follow fixed, minimally adaptive programs. Most variety employ Mass Effect levitation to improve mobility. All modern armies rely on veritable fleets of drones for routine soldiering, static garrisons, patrols, etc. The use of drones in non-critical duties keeps manpower needs down and reduces casualties in low-intensity conflicts. Less advanced races and cultures with less sensitivity to casualties have correspondingly fewer drones in their inventory. Drones are of little use in conventional open-field battles, as they are poorly armed and armored. In addition to the combat drones, support drones are used to assist organic units in the field. Reconnaissance drones are small, stealthy craft that can screen combat units in the field and warn commanders when enemies are spotted. Electronic warfare drones supplement battlefield technicians, serving as mobile jammers and electronic intelligence gathering platforms. Military and civilian police use dazzle drones, equipped with a powerful strobe light, to disorient and subdue intruders using non-lethal force. Drone formations are officially referred to as wings, i.e. deploy the 4th Assault Drone Wing on the left flank. Common soldiers refer to friendly formations as flocks and to enemy formations as swarms. Weapons, adaptive armor. A ship's kinetic barriers reduce the damage from solid objects, but can do nothing to block Guardian lasers, particle beams, or other forms of directed energy weapons. The inner layer of a warship protection consists of ablative armor designed to boil away when heated. The vaporized armor material scatters a due beam, rendering it ineffectual. A scaffold is built around the interior pressure hull with sheets of ablative armor hung from the structure. Ships typically have multiple layers of armor, separated by empty baffles, spaces often used for cargo storage. Cruisers which lack the internal space to fit dedicated fighter hangars store the shipboard fighter compartment in the baffles. It is not unknown for an enlisted crew to build illicit alcohol distilleries in some obscure corner of the baffles, safe from prying eyes. What? That seems insane to me. Why would you... because it's essentially between the different layers of armor. I imagine, first of all, it's very cramped, and second of all, that's exactly the space that's going to get hit. But I guess, you probably wouldn't be moonshining in the middle of a battle. Weapons: disruptor torpedoes. Disruptor torpedoes are powered projectiles with warheads that create random and unstable mass effect fields when triggered. These fields warp space-time in a localized area. The rapid asymmetrical mass changes cause the target to rip itself apart. In flight, torpedoes use a mass-increasing field, making them too massive for enemy kinetic barriers to repulse. The extra mass gives the torpedoes very sluggish acceleration, making them easy prey for defensive Guardian weapons, so the torpedoes have to be launched at very close range. Torpedoes are the main anti-ship weapon used by fighters. They are launched from point-blank range in a ripple fire wave, reminiscent of the ancient Calliope rocket artillery launchers, thus the popular name Callies. By saturating the defensive Guardian system with multiple targets, at least a few will get through. Okay, this is actually pretty interesting and something that I also didn't remember. So apparently torpedoes in this setting work by causing the different parts of the thing that they hit to have different mass. So it literally... it doesn't really work on kinetic damage. It just causes the mass in the same object to be inconsistent with itself, and it tears itself apart. That's actually kind of interesting. Obviously, I'm pretty sure it makes zero sense from an actual, physics standpoint, but the Mass Effect field is basically magic, right? It's kind of a hand-waving tool that you can use to explain all sort of crazy stuff. And I don't have problem with light science fiction, soft science fiction. I can hand-wave a lot of stuff if the story is interesting enough. Weapons, Guardian system. A ship's general area defense integration anti-spacecraft network consists of anti-missile, anti-fighter laser turrets on the exterior hull. Because these are under computer control, the gunnery control officer needs to do little beyond turn the system on and designate targets as hostile. Since lasers move at the speed of light, they cannot be dodged by anything moving at non-relativistic speed. Unless the beam is aimed poorly, it will always hit the target. In the early stages of the battle, the Guardian fire is 100% accurate, if not 100% lethal, but it doesn't have to be. Damaged fighters must break off for repairs. Lasers are limited by diffraction. The beam spreads out, decreasing the energy density, watts per meter squared, of the weapon can place on a target. Any high-powered laser is a short-ranged weapon. Guardian networks have another limitation: heat. Weapon-grade lasers require cooldown time, during which heat is transferred to sinks or radiators. As lasers fire, heat builds within them, reducing damage, range, and accuracy. Fighters will attack in swarms. The first few will be hit by Guardian, but as the battle continues, The effects of laser overheat allows the attackers to press closer to the ship. Constant use will burn out a laser. Guardian lasers typically operate in the infrared frequencies. Shorter frequencies would offer superior stopping power and range, but degradation of focal arrays and mirrors would make them expensive to maintain. And most prefer mechanical reliability over bleeding-edge performance where lives are concerned. Salarians, however, use near-ultraviolet frequency lasers with 6 times the range, believing that the additional time to shoot down incoming missiles is more important. Lasers are not blocked by kinetic barriers of the capital ships. However, the range of lasers limits their use to knife fight range ship-to-ship combat. I think I read that, right? Yeah, biotic training. Biotic implants and amplifiers only provide the potential to create coherent Mass Effect fields. Whether biotics can actually do so is largely determined by their training. Biotics must develop conscious control over their nervous system, sending specific electrical impulses to the Element 0 nodules embedded in their nerves. They are taught to use their implants and amps with biofeedback devices and physical mnemonics. Specific gestures or muscle movements fire the proper sequence of nerves to activate a certain skill. Conatix Industries pioneered biotic training with the Biotic Acclimation and Temperance Training Program. Although the BAT did not achieve the desired results, many techniques taught are still used today. Many human think tanks are trying to develop some form of biotic super soldier. Most of our benign efforts to create more flexible troops. Others, less publicly known, are unapologetic attempts to create Nietzschean Superman. Whoa, that was a lot of reading. So, that's all for this one, and next time I'm going to resume with the normal gameplay. So, that's all for this one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!